I'm Suzanne Murdoch and welcome to Series 3 of Powering Productivity. Each episode I explore the energy that really genuine connections, expertise and being in your best flexible working environment can bring to you, your business and your whole life. So let's get started. Welcome to you. Today I'm with the lovely Pauline Roussel, co-founder of Coworkies, and together with her co-founder Dimitar Inchev, Coworkies is all about helping members of co-working spaces to grow their network and find opportunities globally. Now, Pauline is so natural at engaging, sharing stories and experiences, and pops up all over the globe during her travels to co-working, community and co-living spaces. And Pauline, given all your experiences and wonderful stories, I'm really keen to discuss those smaller micro spaces and operators with you. I guess particularly around challenges that operators face, like the unknowns, how you cope with the evolving markets, and the niches where you've seen them really thrive. And then, if we've time, maybe touch on the opportunities for introducing coaching and mentoring and how this can help bring some solutions to smaller operators and business owners. So, Pauline, if you would, for those who haven't met you before, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, a quick rundown, who you are and what you do, please.
Yes, first things first, thank you so much, Suzanne, for having me on your podcast. We are a big fan of your work. I often see your other conversations popping up, and I always love listening to them. So thanks for having me. I think you already introduced what I do. So yes, I'm Pauline Roussel. I'm French originally. I've been living in Berlin for 10 years. I didn't start my career in co-working originally. I actually started more so in the French bank, a very corporate way of life. But I found my ways in co-working when I moved to Berlin. I became the chief happiness officer of a co-working space that was for early stage startup founders, which is also where I met Dimitar and where the whole journey of Coworkies began. I know we are going to dive into the details of the story, so I don't want to say too much, but I hope that's enough of an introduction for now.
Fantastic. Actually, we've something in common then because I started in banking as well,
There we go.
because co-working didn't even exist back then.
Yeah,
So,
well, in Paris, it was also not a thing actually when I was starting my career. So the word was, I mean, I don't know, there was maybe one or two spaces back in 2011 in Paris, so it was really not very common or popular.
yeah, no, we've come a long way since then. So
Absolutely.
you touched on it a bit there, but tell me a little bit about your journey and what took you from growing up in France, I guess, to moving to Berlin and then traveling all around the world.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story actually because I think the reason why I moved to Berlin was I wanted to stray away from the Parisian life, which I love Paris, don't get me wrong. I was in marketing and communication, but I felt maybe there was something else I could explore. And I also feel lucky to be European because for us it's just easy to move to another country and be able to explore a new work culture, explore new environments. And that's exactly what I did. And I think co-working came to me more so at a time of my life where things were not looking great in terms of my professional career. Because when I moved to Berlin, I worked in an agency again, which is all I knew. But the company culture was very toxic there, and really bad company culture. I cannot emphasize how bad it was. People were just staying 3 months and leaving. And I thought, okay, I didn't move to Berlin for this kind of company culture. I need something else. And while browsing a job board, I came across this title, Chief Happiness Officer. And that's how I came to become basically the managing director of that co-working space. And I think the story behind Coworkies started because while running the space, Dimitar, who I mentioned earlier, was himself entrepreneur in residence. So he was a member of the space and he was working for a startup accelerator. As again, a background, if you remember, the space we had was just for early stage startups. So his role was to help early stage companies to solve some of the issues they had on particular topics. But together we started to really talk about the community we had because it was first very diverse in the sense of age range, cultures. People were coming from all over the world. There were very different profiles from people who, um, had came from India to I don't know wherever. But the range of people was really incredible. And we were witnessing every day so many different connections that were happening, so many different opportunities as well that were being created, that we started to ask, okay, what kind of impact actually is co-working spaces having on people and cities? Because we see that people being a part of our community, they tremendously benefit from this. But what does it mean for other co-working spaces? And I think this is how we started to go around, explore other co-working environments in Berlin at first, to learn how other co-working spaces were creating impact, positive impact for their members. And then on and on, we continued the journey, and that's how we started traveling. So as of today, we visited over 550 co-working spaces in 65 cities. And
Wow.
I think the overarching question for us is always to learn about the impact of co-working spaces on people and cities that have the chance to have them. And I just want to say we look at it on a very broad perspective. So not just in big cities. We love, as you said in the introduction, to also explore, rural environments or remote places to understand how co-working also can make a difference in different contexts. And the traveling, as you also said, led us to, on one side, create Coworkies as a platform that helps people find jobs in co-working spaces and educate themselves about co-working. But also the book that you, I think, mentioned as well in the introduction, Around the World in 250 Co-working Spaces, where we really celebrate the industry around the world and the people who make this industry so interesting.
Fantastic. And are there any spaces, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this question, are there any spaces that stand out?
It's such a difficult question for us to understand because all of them are so unique. We always say co-working is the same dish, everyone cooks differently. And I think that's very true. You always, whichever space you enter is different. Whichever space you enter has a different story to tell you or a different experience to offer to you. So I think for us, obviously, there are some that stay with you because the fact that they're so far away and that they are so different in nature to what you were used to be. I'm thinking, or used to see. I'm thinking, for instance, when we went to Japan or when we went to India, you really remember those because culturally it's so different. But overall, all the spaces we've met and seen and visited, they are all so fascinating just because they exist and they create positive impact every day.
And they're all they give you different vibes. And I guess because the industry is so much about people, they all bring different experiences as well. So it's
Yes,
difficult to choose. And
exactly.
then
Yeah.
and then I wanted to touch on the TEDx talk that you did. Is it the American
Yes.
University of Bulgaria? That was fascinating. And how you talked around moving out of your lane. Tell me a bit about that.
Yes, because obviously everybody's journey is different. I think for me, being brought up in France, the culture, the educational system is very, I would say, rigid. And I still feel that you have to fit in a mold and you have to be where you are basically. So if you don't fit, it's very difficult to find your place. And I think for me, since the very early age of going to school in France, that's what you're taught, to stay in your lane, to be a good student, to study well. But then when you enter the corp, the job culture, the work culture, it's the same. I told you, I was working in a bank, and everything when I started I was very excited, and you have so many ideas you want to share, but of every time people are like, yeah, it's good, but it's kind of like not your place. So it feels like very diminishing as a person. You cannot just voice what you want, or
Yeah.
you cannot just help the company basically at least grow in understanding of or perspective of their employees. You just have to stay in what you're in your job description. And that's, I think, also one of the reasons why for me that type of work felt very restrictive. Whereas in co-working, when I became a chief happiness officer in Berlin, it felt that I could do anything and everything. So suddenly you have this chance to touch on so many things, which I think we are going to talk about that also. Sometimes can feel overwhelming because it's a lot of different responsibilities at once. But overall, I feel like you have through in the co-working world, when you have a job in the co-working space, you have the chance to touch on so many different topics.
Yeah, and there's no 2 days the same. And because we're evolving, everything's
Absolutely.
evolving so quickly, it's really exciting industry to be in as well.
That's very true. Yeah, there's never a day that's the same. We see
Yeah.
that all the time.
And then you get involved in a lot of the co-working conferences behind the scenes, doing a lot of the putting together as well as working on the panels and facilitating that side of things. Tell me a little bit about that and how the experiences affect what you're doing going forward.
I mean, I think because we travel so much and we meet so many different people, we always look at ways to give back and ways to have those stories and those experiences gain visibility and prominence beyond the city they are at or the work they are doing in their own spaces. So being able to, create events, whether they are our own or whether we contribute to other events and position other people so that they can share their stories, for us is everything because that's maybe a small thing, but just the fact that that person's work can be seen by so many others is so important to us. Because I think something I didn't touch on is that the reason why also Coworkies exist as a company is to make coworking better. We really want to support the industry in getting better at experiences they offer, teams they grow, and all of that can only happen if there is knowledge sharing, if there is these connections between individuals that are facilitated. And that's really what we aim at when we, as you said, like when I speak at conferences or when I moderate conversations, that's really what I try to facilitate also, this knowledge sharing and exchange between people. Because the more we learn from each other, the better we can get at what we are doing also.
Yeah, and you're talking at the Juicy London conference coming up.
Yes, I'm really excited about that because I've never attended any Juicy so far. So I'm really excited to be joining a panel on more so the talent side of things, which is obviously very connected to what Coworkies is as a job board and educational platform. So at Juicy, I will be discussing people are your competitive edge, which I think is a really interesting topic.
Definitely. No, I look forward to that because I'll be there as well. And I think these conferences are really, really good because they highlight areas that certain operators, particularly the micro and SME operators, might not even be aware of, certain elements of compliance, perhaps, or things that you could be doing that you're not aware of. And I think having that collective support to help you on those stepping stones is a really valuable thing, as well as
Absolutely.
the friends aspects and meeting new contacts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you also moderate panels yourself, so you know very well how, the fact that being able to go to these events to learn in one day so much uh, from experiences, from, as you said, networking opportunities is very valuable because then I feel everybody that attend an event, generally, whether it's online or offline, you go home and you have so much to think about on how to, move forward for your space, your community, and your team as well.
Yeah, I think they make me curious and like fill me with energy to keep going.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah, very, very true.
And you touched on the book Coworkies earlier in the conversation. Tell me a little bit about that and how things are going with the book.
So the book, it came out really out of the different. It didn't. It came out of the encounters we had while on the road. I remember we were in New York actually visiting a co-working space called Based In, and I think by then we had maybe seen hundreds so co-working spaces. And when we spoke with the founder of that co-working space, which is an independent brand, we ended up talking for a fair bit of time about co-working and everything we had seen. And he said, "Oh, you guys should really write a book. I would love to." Flip through the pages of stories and learn from others. And I think it connects to what you were saying earlier about events and in-person events. Because obviously, right now, the co-working as an industry, if we are honest, is still relatively new, compared to other industries like hospitality, hotels, they're much older type of industries. So you have a lot of events, a lot of happenings and ways to learn. But through the book, we thought that this was a chance for us to celebrate the brands we had the chance to visit, but also celebrate the industry overall. And most importantly, also open up the conversation and the awareness about co-working to a broader audience. Because oftentimes co-working is just, it's a bubble. So through the book, we thought maybe there is an entry door for other people to look at co-working in different ways. So the book highlights obviously people, teams, but also interior design, communities, and like stories where everybody can learn again about the positive impact of co-working, co-working. Sorry, I was going to say co-working. The positive impact of co-working through different perspectives, and realize how important those type of social spaces are to any kind of cities. So yeah, the book highlights 250 brands, as the title suggests, and they are literally from everywhere. As I said, it's not just about capital cities. They are co-working brands from rural areas of Japan. I think you actually even had Yoshio on one of your
Oh, yeah, we're
podcasts.
about to. Yeah.
Okay, so are you about to? So
Yeah.
then your listeners will be able to meet him. But so he's one of them, all the way to busy New York. So yeah, we really wanted also to show the diversity there is when we talk about co-working these days. Because for the general public, co-working is this thing that's for startups and freelancers. But through the book, we also highlight examples where you see communities from chefs or parents or elderly that are benefiting from the model of co-working. So I think for us, having this physical object that people can learn from and consume at their own space was also very important.
See, that's the interesting thing for me because at the moment we're seeing a lot of corporate brands who
Mm-hmm.
were perhaps smaller operators. They're now beginning to be more branded and they're operating more and more spaces. But you're also seeing at the other end a lot more community driven groups
Yeah,
moving into co-working who are not set up as businesses but more organizations, co-ops, etc. So there's all these different strands coming in, and then you've obviously got the hospitality hotel side of things, and it's really evolving very, very fast. And I guess for this purposes of this conversation, I was quite keen to look at more of the micro
mm-hmm.
SME operator spaces and what you think over your travels you've seen as the top challenges that they tend to experience.
That's a very good question and very important one as well. I think obviously there are so many independent co-working operators who oftentimes operate on like smaller teams. So one of the challenges we see for them is time management, how to be able to do everything in such short days when you have to operate the space. If you have an event venue, you have to organize events. I mean, the workload gets really heavy for smaller teams, but also obviously depending on where they're located, if whether it's a big city or a smaller one, the business model is also sometimes challenging. Being able to generate enough income to sustain is also a real challenge. And oftentimes what we see is that people, when they start and they have a smaller space, they're excited and they um, really push for it. And after a few years, they, as we said earlier, they burn out because everything, if they do not take care of themselves in the mix, because you often, it's co-working, I think, is a lot about passion as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel the smaller operators are so passionate that sometimes they tend to forget themselves in the mix of everything that happens throughout the day. And when that happens, one of the challenge of burning out can arise, and that's very bad because obviously then you don't have that passion anymore to keep going because it's really tiring. So I think, yeah, that's some of the challenges we've definitely seen smaller players facing.
Yes, no, it's certainly something. I mean, I've personally experienced that previously. And I think you really
Mm.
have to play that balancing act and keep checking in with yourself time and time again. Um, but we touched earlier on the whole community aspect of these spaces. Certainly, from my
Mhm.
perspective, comes into play and very much um, working together with them and finding what their expertise is. And if there's someone that can help you, then pull on their strengths and vice versa. And also, I think if you're in that the right community, it fills you with that sense of belonging and it fills you with energy. So
Absolutely.
it brings more clarity and focus into what you should be doing and prioritizing.
Absolutely. And to echo on what you're saying, we all often say, because obviously we've seen so many co-working spaces, and it's not uncommon for people to write to us and be like, oh, I will be in Athens next week. Which co-working space would you recommend me to go to? And oftentimes we don't just give one, we give a few and we ask people to try them because, as you just said, not everybody fits in the spaces that you like. I think choosing a co-working space is like choosing a hotel or choosing a restaurant. Those are like very personal criteria that you have or I have, and also depending on what kind of work you need to do. So I think whenever you want to find a community that's the right fit for you in co-working, you have to give yourself the chance to maybe try a few until you find it, because not every co-working space is the same. As we said earlier, they're all very unique. So it's also a bit of a road, a bit of your own journey to build, to find the right community that will resonate with what you believe in, the type of opportunities they offer, and even as an operator, also being able to, understand that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
very important.
And also the members as an operator, the members that you attract, I think Also kind of go hand in hand with your personality, values, your energy, and the best
Absolutely.
ways that you operate in, the
Yeah,
ways that you work
absolutely.
best in. It's very interesting that. So it's not just around the operators, obviously it's the members and the whole wider ecosystem as well of co-working
Hmm.
members, globally, because we all feed into each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on that note, we often say that the co-working space, when you enter it, is the reflection of the founders. So you can see the personality of the founder in the space, when you enter it, and then the members, that's what attracts them also, like yeah, there are many different criteria that attract people to co-working spaces. For some, it's what will break it or make it will be the interior design, the cleanliness, the smell, the team. So, there are all those different components that come to people for them to be able to feel like, okay, this is where I belong. I can picture myself working here every day, having conversations with people. So, yeah, very, very true. The team is very important in that.
Yeah. And as you're going back to challenges and things and collective solutions, have you come across many of the smaller operators who manage to get funding for different projects that they're doing, or are they generally self-funded?
I guess it depends. I think it's not that easy to get funding, especially because, again, co-working is not so known uh, within, at least within the European Union and everything, to get access to those programs. It does exist, obviously. There are funding opportunities exist, but I think it's good, but it's also there's also a bit of a risk, I think, in
Yeah,
public funding particularly, that I want to address, because I think funding is essential for you to be able to develop projects and maybe improve the space, or whichever type of funding you go for a specific project is great. But I also see that sometimes when co-working spaces rely too much on public funding, when that goes away, then comes the real problem of like, okay, what do I do now if I cannot have a proper business model that functions without public funding? So I think it's there are opportunities that we've seen even like nationwide. I know that many governments are supporting co-working spaces with funding, but I also want to say don't just rely on public funding, because it
yeah,
can be very detrimental to your core business. So finding the right balance, I think, is very important.
yeah. And then do you find, throughout your travels, do you find that communities differ in the way that they engage, maybe the events that they run, depending on the location, the culture, and the size?
Absolutely. And Suzanne, I'm going to give you an example. So as I said in the intro, I'm French, but I started my journey of co-working in Berlin. And France and Germany are neighbors countries. But when I moved to Germany, I didn't think there would be such a huge cultural shock, because we're neighbors. I was like, it's Europe, we're close by, it's the same. But when I looked at events, it was very interesting to see that, for instance, in Berlin, when we were hosting events, we had the most success if the event would happen during the day, because in Berlin, people at the time were valuing very much, the work-life balance. So if it happens during the day, I can attend it. I will make the time to attend it because it's during my work day. But then after work or before work, I don't want to have work in my head. Whereas, for instance, when we went to Paris and we visited co-working spaces there, we were discussing with the teams and we're like, okay, so what kind of events do you have? And they're like, oh, we only do apéro, like people, they don't like to have events during the day. They prefer to stay late. And like, so we do events starting from 7:30 in the evening, and we just drink wine and la la la. And I was like, wow, it's interesting, like, so two countries who are very close to each other, but totally different ways of approaching community events, because obviously the culture plays a role in, like, okay, after work I can stay, or after work I want to go home and do something that's not work related. So
Yeah,
that was really, really interesting for us to witness that from countries that are so close by. But generally, I would say yes, culture plays a very important role in co-working. Like, if you go, for instance, I can give you another example. If you go in Japan, it's not uncommon for you to have to remove your shoes and wear home shoes to work in the co-working space. So they provide you with those home shoes so that you don't, the shoes are dirty from the outside, but also some of them are loud when you walk. So when they give you those shoes for the home, they're quiet and they're clean, so they can make sure that the environment remains proper for everyone. That's yet another example we have not come across in many different other regions.
Oh, I'd love that. That's a great idea.
right? Yeah,
But actually here in well, certainly in the spaces I've been in Ireland, the events have very much been during the day.
yeah.
And I know for us, we have a lot of members that have been with us since the start, so for over 10 years. And it's almost come full generation. We had an inquiry from one of our original members' sons the other day. So it's very family orientated, and we've
Oh,
seen the
nice.
children grow up, not necessarily together, but they're similar ages and gone through exams and different experiences. So yeah, it's a lovely family culture, even though we've got freelancers, small businesses, and some corporate members. I think the culture molds very
Yeah.
well together because more or less they're quite local people, um, even though it's still quite a diverse network. No, it's interesting to me, the different opportunities and ways of doing things.
Yeah, and I think your example also shows that, you leave a mark on many different people, like people who come to work at your space every day, but also their families who somehow connect with it because one of their family members is a part of the community, and they
Hmm.
also want somehow to be a part of it in their own way. So I think
Yeah.
that's also a really nice story to have, like families, passing on the baton and being like, okay, now I'm also a part of Suzanne's community.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. It's heartwarming.
Yeah,
So and then I
it's
guess if we
a good,
touch on
um,
oh sorry, if we
go,
touch
sorry.
on like possibly bringing in, have you had any experience of coaching, mentoring roles within co-working spaces and helping operators?
So we recently started retreats targeted at community managers in co-working spaces. The reason why we started them was we understood, looking at the job they do every day, that they take care. How about we create in-person experiences and we discuss all things community in different lights. We look at challenges they face. We use the collective to solve those challenges, and we help them also gain reassurance and confidence in the importance of their role. So we've started doing that, but I think it's very important to have more opportunities for co-working teams to educate themselves and to be coached and trained. Because again, if we think about the industry getting better and offering better experiences, it all comes down to the way the team is trained and the confidence they get in the role they do. So I think coaching and training is very important. And that's also something you do, right?
Yeah, and also I guess from the personal perspectives of those business leaders and helping them get that clarity and really understand their purpose, where their energy comes from, and then from the juggling aspect, because there's an awful lot of roles that they have to focus on almost at the same time. And the way everything's evolving so quickly, it's important to get that energy and the priorities right as well and giving them support there. But I think if we pull together collectively, there's a big support network there that can be pulled upon that isn't necessarily being done at the moment. And I think actually
Absolutely.
the meetup I was with last week with Bernie Mitchell and the London Co-working Assembly is a great example of that. Um, is yes, there's some of the larger operators are there, but it's a really good platform. It's very laid back. There is that sense of belonging to really share challenges and possible solutions that you might not necessarily feel comfortable about sharing in certain other environments. So I guess it's finding that platform as well and coming
Yeah,
together, almost like a mastermind group. That there are people out there, there are
yeah,
solutions, and you can share worries, concerns, things that you don't know that you'd like to learn a bit more about.
yeah. And I think that's also the beauty of having options and places where people feel safe to, talk about the challenges they are encountering. Because sometimes it's the hardest part of the job. So having those communities where you can do just that and learn from others and feel like you're not the only one is
Yeah.
really, really important.
Yeah, that's a key thing is sometimes it can feel a bit isolated, but you're really not on your own. And having that safe
Yeah,
space where you can get curious and explore is a really special time because you don't have that time to think about things like that and to talk. It's yeah, it's a safe space is the key thing for me and getting curious. So no, there's so much interesting stuff going on. We could talk and talk. But
yes.
Pauline, what's next for yourself, Dimitar and Co-workies?
So book number 2 is underway.
Oh,
It's going to be a little bit different, but yes, that's something we are currently working on. And I think for us, generally, the overarching thing with Coworkies is to further our mission to make coworking better. So that means providing more opportunities for people to find jobs in coworking spaces, for them to educate themselves and grow their careers within the coworking world. And then also generally, one thing I didn't mention so much, but we also work a lot with universities and companies to help them understand what's coworking. So I think keeping on being this link between society and coworking for us is very important to keep on spreading awareness about coworking to communities who might not be aware of it or misunderstand it is also very important to us. So that's what we look at moving forward.
fantastic. And where can people find out a bit more about you?
So myself, on LinkedIn, I would no, don't be shy, connect with me. I have the LinkedIn Coworkies. I think the best way is also to follow us on LinkedIn or Instagram. We also have a Readers Club where we share a lot of insights and coworking case studies about coworking brands we've been visiting or writing about through our book or the online events we host. So that's like I can give you the link after the event, but
Yeah, please do.
club.coworkiesbook.com is where it's at. So I think those three, the Readers Club, LinkedIn, and Instagram are great ways for people to check what we do. And obviously, if people are hiring, the job board coworkies.com is also a great place to post an ad.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put all of that in the show notes. Pauline, it's been so good talking to you. We could talk all day about everything you're up
Thank
to.
you so much. Yes.
You're very
Thank you so
welcome.
much for this great conversation and for all the wonderful work you do within your own space, but also for the coworking community. We are very lucky to have someone like you in the industry. Thank you so much,
Oh,
Suzanne.
you're very flattering. Thanks, Pauline, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. You can find more information in the show notes or on our website, thehubnuri.com. While you're there, why not join our mailing list so we can keep you in the know about everything we're up to? And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen so you don't miss an episode. Powering Productivity is presented by me, Suzanne Murdoch. It's produced by Emily Crosby Media.